I wanted to start by thinking about the idea of community. And one of the things that Massaquoi has said about the Southside Community Arts Center, which, I certainly understood from all the research I did about the center. So I wondered if each of you could very quickly talk about, that idea of your hand on the pulse of the community, based on your own sense of community, and how you do that. I mean, how do you keep your hand on the pulse of the community? So, do you want to start and just,
I can. Yeah.
Yeah,
and lovingly is Massaquoi.
Massaquoi.
Yes.
Okay.
Massaquoi. Most people want to say Massaquoi, and I understand
Right.
that because of English vowel system. but it's
Exactly.
Massaquoi.
Okay.
Alrighty. Philip and I were talking earlier, and on the break, and one of the funders asked me a question almost 3.5 years ago when they were considering giving Southside Community Arts Center some capacity growth money. And we did get the grant. I jumped to the end of the story because that wasn't the point. The point was a question that I was asked in that conversation. And the question was, what is my definition of community? And I kind of immediately knew where he was going, so I thought, and I wound up being correct. And I talked about, for me, I wish I was prepared for that question, but it worked. For me, community means two things. There's the definition of community in terms of logistically, the proximity in which you closely live with someone or around other people, and I'm doing the short version. And then there's the community of people who have like minds and interests. For those of us who are artists or art lovers, then we'll have that interest, and we can usually find each other. The concern was the fact that in most of our communities in the larger cities, particularly, there's gentrification going on. And so that is happening in Bronzeville as well. And so we have an influx of white folks moving in, Asian people moving in, Mexican people moving in somewhat. It's still predominantly black. My point is this: if we're all going to get past the polarization of negativity about who we are as human beings, then we must communicate. We must speak with each other. We must be around each other. I'm not saying we have to marry and live next door and all of that. If that's what you want to do, that's fine too. But what I'm saying is, if we keep ourselves separate, we don't educate ourselves, then we're never going to gain the respect of each other. And so even if the community is changing, if the community becomes all something else or a mixture, the need to know African American truths are important to everybody. And everybody's heritage and history is important to everybody. So I see no stopping of the Southside Community Arts Center, regardless of who walked through the doors. That's my answer.
The three of you mentioned the idea of gentrification as part of your work in some ways, and both as an impediment, but also an asset. Mm-hmm. So, Devin, you want to give us a sense of how you have your hand on the pulse of the community?
Yeah, for me, is working in the community that I've been in. I lived in Baltimore all my life, so I have a sense of connection to it. And then even, so it's pretty easy for me, but, I'm from West Baltimore, so going to East Baltimore, it's a different area. Even though I'm from Baltimore, the culture's a little different, it's in a small city. But, I have respect for every community that I work in, and I'm real big on using conduits. So I do my research, and even if I'm going, I want to go to Oakland and work, I'm going to do my research. I'm going to find Oakland photographers that are going to help me get my initiative done. So it's actually doing research and making sure that you're showing respect for the community, in everywhere that I go. And so just, it's spending a lot of time too. It's like, I'm not a big fan of just parachuting into a place and then leaving, and not really building that connection. As a documentary journalist, when I'm working on stories or documenting anything, I always, build a connection to my subject. So I'm very good at, doing my research and getting to know a person and really getting them to take down their guards and really building a stable connection. And and I'm real big on just like all the kids that I work with. I go work with another set of kids, but my kids I'm very accessible. My kids can still reach me. So it's building that friendship, that fellowship, that camaraderie, making it long term. As far as gentrification, it's something that's happened in almost every city that I've went through. I've seen it in Oakland. I've talked to activists in Seattle about it. It's something happening globally. And in Baltimore, the city is changing so fast, but a lot of these places have been starving for so long. And when you talk about Baltimore, I remember when during the uprising, CNN was showing buildings saying that we burned them down, but I'm like, ironically, these houses were burned down in the '60 riots, and then you had white flight, and then we starved, then we got hit with crack, and then, and then everything else, So, but then some people see the value in it, and and then in the city where we living with so much poverty, we don't see the value in what we already have. So you got places like John Hopkins that can, your house is worth, $1 million to them. They know that, so they're like, we're gonna lowball you. And then move you to the county. And in hindsight, we thinking we're moving on up, but then actually you're moving to the county, but now you have to pour public transportation because most people that live in the surrounding counties have have cars. They drive. So when you're moving from the projects out there, and, you can't afford to shop in the type of places. So it's sad, and it's something that that I'm real big on right now because I'm watching places that I grew up are disappearing, and I don't even feel comfortable in certain spaces because it don't feel like my space anymore.
And you're making work about that now too.
Yes, my show, similar to some of the work you're doing, it's called Spaces of the Unentitled. So I hear this word entitlement a lot, definitely since post-Trump presidency. Everyone talks about entitlement, but what about the people that don't have that entitlement? So I just made the word up, unentitled. And what I was looking to do is I wanted to bring emotion to the buildings because they're way more than just a vacant building. What about the stories? And I crack them open and I go in and I'm seeing items, family portraits. So I start taking these things, and I got report cards from 1940. I got, stuff from the 80s. I got clothing, and I took it and I built installations. So when people come into my show, I want to bring an emotion. I want to give this place an identity. So the next time when people look at Gentrify or buy something, look at the history behind it, see what you're changing and what you're erasing. It's a lot more damage than what you think you're doing.
Eric?
Yeah. I mean, like Masika mentioned, I think community opens the possibility for complexity and in representation. That when I think about photography and how we talk about representation in photography or in politics, is lacking, or in the history of photography has been problematic and exclusive. And so I think in work where I've worked in communities, the goal was to create community and connect with people and spend a long time getting past the problematics of representation. And when I say the problematics of representation, I just mean like getting past the stereotypes, like the images that would be, that refer to a kind of violent history of the way in which photographers have represented people in these places before. But I will also say that on the For Freedoms Project, one of the questions we get a lot is, well, you're working at the national scale. What about like individual communities where you're working? And we're thinking about the idea of the translocal, which is a word I picked up working at Apple Shop in Eastern Kentucky, where people are deeply entrenched in Appalachian community, but they're also connected to other communities, like in Tanzania, that are deeply entrenched in their rural community and in other places around the country and around the world. Can
you just say what Apple Shop is?
Apple Shop is it's in the 60s, the sons and daughters of coal miners decided they didn't want to grow up to be coal miners, and so they created basically at first just a collective and then eventually an institution that invests in Appalachian culture and local culture, and they've made a series of films over the years. There's now a youth program where where young people learn to make films and tell Appalachian stories. There's a radio station that values Appalachian music, and it's become a way of preserving culture in resistance to, you know, the economic and political forces that circumscribe lives in, you know, the lives of people in Eastern Kentucky. Yeah, so I mean, I invented a word too, which was anti-partisan, to describe how what we're not bipartisan or nonpartisan, because I don't think anything's neutral. I think it's about, you know, countering the sort of assumptions that we make about the definitions and categories that define us in terms of our identity, in terms of politics, and then figuring out ways that we can find community across geographic communities to work together on those things.
Rick?
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of said most of it. So I just do simple things, you know, just try to keep proximity to the people where I'm working, and you know, and not make it a big deal. I mean, just trying to figure out what people do, what they like to do, and I try to do it, you know. If it's playing dominoes, going to church, shooting some pool, basketball, do it all.
Can you talk a little bit more about your, a couple of times you mentioned Joseph Beuys and his ideas about social sculpture and, you know, how art is within all of us, and, you know, society itself could be thought about as art. And it's something I see that runs right through your, you know, your projects. And can you talk a little bit more about that connection with conceptual art and sort of how that informed you to do what you did?
Yeah, I think at the core of what I'm interested in as an artist is kind of, you know, how we perform as human beings, how we perform our highest task, that is building a humanity. And you know, and I think in the Boysian sense, you know, we've been failed by so many different systems of doing, you know, from, religion failed us, politics is failing us, and, you know, so there's always, you know, as a species, we're always trying to figure out what vehicles can we use to kind of help us move our humanity forward. And I just think that this concept, I mean, he kind of framed it, you know, social sculpture, but there are many people. You can even talk about John Dewey, you know, who, you know, talked about art as experience, and, you know, and trying to, and the conceptualist, you know, dematerializing the object, so we can really get to the crux of, you know, what it is that we're all about, which is, you know, trying to figure out how we use our creativity to improve the place that we have to live in, and trying to, you know, I think the whole point of social sculpture is to really trying to create platforms through which people can actually encourage the creativity of everyone, and not, you know, try to hoard that as a sacred ground specifically and only for artists, or for, you know, artists in the traditional sense.
One of the things that I remember speaking with Gordon Parks about years ago was his understanding, really, when he was just beginning as a photographer, that African Americans had very little control over their own images. And it was one of the things that really made him, you know, push to, you know, want to learn photography and be a photographer. And I wonder about how, you know, I mean, he often also would work really hard to do research and you know, understand a person or a place or a community before he'd ever even bring a camera there. I wonder, like, Devin, how connected are you to those ideas, you know, and you know, I see your work as being, you know, really important in helping young people to understand that, you know, you have to take control of your own image and make your own images.
Yeah, definitely. Photography, you know, for me, when I'm working on projects, even outside of projects, I finished up a story about the opiate crisis for BuzzFeed, and I followed a recovering addict, but I spent like 6 months with him. The first time we met, I gave him a copy of my book. I met with him and his counselor. We chilled. Then we went to his house. We did crossword puzzles. I went and met his family. And just to, get to know him. And really build that connection. And in turn, it comes through in the photography. You can tell when your subject is comfortable. But it's very important that we tell our own story. I didn't understand it either. I was just taking pictures and document. I didn't know I was documenting. I just, I found myself, I just didn't see any images of myself anywhere, really. Like growing up, photography wasn't in school. It wasn't in the history books or anywhere. And I really realized that a lot of the history definitely is in the Black Family album. Like we documented our own stuff and families, but we all grandma got a whole bunch of pictures or something, all the cookout pictures. And then Aaron Brown from the Smithsonian, who mentored me, gave me Deborah Willis's book and this film called Through a Lens Darkly. And after I watched that, that's when I understood right then and there what I needed to do. So now I even switched the way I teach kids. It was just about, me being so successful and being accessible to them, showing them how to do it. And then in turn, I had to teach them how to digest it, and then that's why it's super important just to spend that time, but I definitely love the way Gordon Parks could connect to his subjects. You can tell that he respected what he was photographing. Even for me to this day with representation, I had a gig to go document the Women's March in DC, and I said, I'm not a woman. Go hire a woman photographer to do it. You're not meant to document everything. Sometimes it's better to just pass those things off. And I found that out when I was in Salzburg, Austria, and I snuck into a Syrian refugee camp, and I found myself not being able to tell that story in an image because I didn't really truly understand. Instead, I put the camera down just to play soccer with the kids, hear their stories, and sometimes I judge a photographer, and sometimes a photographer knows when not to take the picture, and that really makes you a good photographer, knowing when not to snap. Sometimes it's better just put the camera down. So I judge photographers off that too. It's not about always taking a picture. Sometimes you gotta put the camera down and really enjoy that moment and the essence of that time, and understanding that you cannot, tell this story, and it may be better for someone else to tell it.
There's two sides to this. There, artists working in the communities, and then there's community building that takes place at a sort of institutional level that then helps to support artists to do what you do. And all of you are working kind of across this. Eric, do you have thoughts about that in terms of like community building and the work that you do?
Yeah, I think we're trying to build a community of artists or of people to feel comfortable using their creativity to reimagine the biggest, the ways in which their lives are shaped. It's kind of unlocking the possibility that creativity and art as one form of creativity could be a way, that's what we're promoting, could be a way of engaging with public life. The funny part, and Rick and Devin, you both just mentioned, it's pretty simple in a way to like spend time with somebody and get to know them. It's just like, yeah, do what they do, or, get to know, just spend time. But within the institutions that are actually set up, whether it's educational institutions through schools or philanthropy or community institutions, funding institutions, city governments, that idea of just humanity being a way of engaging in community it seems to be more difficult for whatever reason. And so it seems like artists are able to work in that way a little bit more nimbly.
I just want to chime in. Yeah, because it's really about, because I love what you're doing. I have a show with For Freedom, but y'all reached out to Micah, the kids that go to Micah that curated the show, and they actually, went out and got, me, who was a local artist, and they got my friend who's a local artist. So it's also it's big on collaboration, just like collaborating. I think a lot of institutions overstep that bounds because they think they have all the answers just because they have the funding. Yeah. Sometimes it's best to reach into the community and pull a leader out and say, hey, let's collaborate.
Already doing this
you already
stuff.
doing this. Let me elevate you and amplify your voice in the work that you're already doing. A lot of the people that are doing good work just do the work. I know so many amazing activists and people on the ground that don't know how to write a grant. They just do the work and figure it out. But, it's a communication and collaboration that when it happens and then it works really well.
I will say also that the Southside Community Arts Center, being an institution, has really taken on some procedures and processes that continue to invite the community in. And that's important. To have a space, an actual physical space in which someone can go to be reaffirmed, to learn, to be appreciated, is really important. And the Southside Community Arts Center has always functioned as those incubators, or as an incubator before people knew about incubators. People will come to the Southside Community Arts Center and start their organizations because they had a place in which people could come to. So for an example, Kuumba Workshop, founded by Val Gray Ward, started at the Southside Community Arts Center. And AfriCobra, early days at the Southside Community Arts Center. Obasi, Darlene Blackburn, and we can go, that's dance, and we can go on, AACM. And so what the institution does is kind of intertwines and connects generations. And when that happens, it's a strengthening of the community. If I can say, I went to the Southside Community Arts Center, which I can, you're looking at the past, the present, and the future, looking at me. I was a teenager when I walked through the doors of the Southside Community Arts Center. And then we had the young man I talked about, Ramon Static, who's now in his 30s, would be the next generation. He's walked through. Then we have the 20-somethings that are coming through the Southside Community Arts Center. So institution building, we all are doing is if we connect ourselves to one, and if we don't, individually, we are building as well.
Well, it's interesting to me then how long it goes on. I mean, generations pass it on to the next generation, and a place like the Southside Community Arts Center has been 75 years?
Yeah,
More,
we've gone
I
into
mean,
our 78th year.
Yeah.
We're 78
and
years.
so, without that incubator or environment, Gordon Parks never would have done what he did. I'm convinced of that. And
I'm
any
convinced I
number
might
of
not
others.
have done what I've done. I've traveled
Yeah.
the world. I've worked and produced and created in Africa, in Europe, in South America. And what I'm saying is when I walked through those doors, I got the permission, because I saw images of people who looked like me on the wall, to be myself. I got permission to follow an artistic career, which was not really supported that much. It still isn't supported that much. And so that's how important an institution can be. And it'll be there when you come home from school. It'll be there before you attend school. So institution building is vital.
I have one more quick question, and then I want to open it up to everybody. But Rick, you're also a teacher. How do you teach this stuff?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah, it is. It's difficult because I think there are there are some basic skills and stuff, but I think the one thing that I'm drawn to with my students though is about kind of helping them understand what they're really trying to figure out how to be honest about who they are and what their temperament is and what their how they deal with life in the world. Because I think one of the challenges of expanding creativity outward is and institutionalizing it is that people start to do it when they shouldn't. You know, and and I mean, or they start to do it in ways that they shouldn't. So I tell students, as a class, if we're collaborating, not everybody's going to be the person that has the personality that can go out and talk to kids or, seniors, or go to a basketball court and play around and whatever. Everybody's not going to be the person that can do that part, but the work embodies a lot more than that. So there may be someone who's a great person that sits back and observe and document, and that's, so really trying to figure out who they are and understanding themselves in relation to the work that's done, so they can so they can be themselves in the work, and not trying to force themselves to do something that fits the model of how the success stories show that it should be done. Because within those success stories, there's multiple layers of how the work happens. I mean, there's been plenty of people that have worked with me in many projects that they don't have the personality and the desire to be out front and to be talking about and doing, but they're vital to the work. And so that's the key to me, is trying to figure out who we are and what role we can best play.
Good. Okay, we've been kicking around the word community a lot. I think that, in some ways, as artists and administrators, it's a complex word. We don't always know what it means and how to use it best. But I think one of the questions I want to address, not with all of you right now, but be part of this conversation, but I want to ask this of the audience and also invite you all to ask questions of the artists here. What is the future of artists working in communities? Where do we go from where we are now? Please, if people have other questions.
Community is like one of my big words, because that's where I work, in the community. That's my studio. So this dialogue that you're talking about, the institutional way of working in the community, one of the most important things I heard the photographer say was, you don't need to take a picture of this, don't take a picture of this, because it's an invasion when you take a picture of somebody. It's exploitation. It's the same thing as the evening news does, showing these shots that do. And I think that that's more about you than about the subject or the person. So these relationships, because you all seem to be prototypes or models of all actually what you're doing when you're working in the community. It's the international panel up there, you're going all over the world. And so what's been the common denominator that allows you to do what you do in the community?
That's an interesting question. Common denominator. Well, I will tell you this. I believe in order to be successful in what you do, you have to be authentic. You have to be, I don't want to use the word real, but because it's just overused, but real will work. You have to come from a place of honesty, and because people will see that and trust. So that is what I believe sets the tone for what I do. And the feedback that I get is that you really love what you do. And in loving what you do, you respect it. And we feel that, and that transcends to us. So I'm going to say a common denominator means to be in love with what you do and in love with the people that you do it with. I love mankind. Sometimes I get a little esoterical, but I love mankind, but not ignore reality.
Yeah, like community. I'm successful because I have a community around me. Like that old saying, it takes a village. Like I have a village around me, and the reason why I'm successful. I have the Goring Parks Foundation that's backing me. I have, Aaron Brown from the Smithsonian. I have, people like Hank in my corner and Swiss Beats. every level, as an artist has been my relationships. So when I go and I even collaborate with other artists and I meet definitely other artists or wannabe artists, I try to give them the tools also, to help build a community around them too. I feel like every artist that's successful has a good community around them and a good network of people, so that's one thing, definitely being an artist and coming from a city where art, I wish we had something like that in Baltimore. We don't even have rec centers in Baltimore. They shut them all down, I go into my community, I get looked at a little different, because my community backs me and they hold me to on a high level. Like if you go around Baltimore and ask about me, that's everybody knows me. And I try to go in and try to activate other artists because I don't have a community of artists with me right now in Baltimore, but we're building. I have amazing writer friends and everything, and we work as a unit, and we move in a unit, and we wake up other artists, and then we build around them. So I think it's just building and bringing in more people into like this larger, family. Like I got my boy right here. He from DC. He saw I was talking. He came through. That's family. That's a community,
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Danae Barr, and I'm a Washington, D.C. native, and I'm a visual and performing artist. And I've crossed paths with Devin Allen in Baltimore. He's a blessing to Baltimore. I just want to say that publicly and really appreciate it. My question, I'm hoping all the panelists will answer. I believe that the arts and humanities is really the saving grace of our humanity, and I do believe that across all educational, business, economic sectors, that the arts and humanities can permeate and uplift communities. And so my question is, how do you usher in positive social change across economic, educational status within your community via the vehicle of the arts and humanities or via photography? Or art in general.
Okay, artists, it's up to you.
I mean, I think it goes back to something that Rick said earlier about social sculpture and imagining or recognizing that everybody is capable of being everybody is an artist and everybody is capable of creating the surrounding, the world in which they live. And I do think I love your description of how you approach your students. I'm going to use that with my students I think the best teachers I've ever had are ones that see me, and that allow me to flourish in whatever way I can. I think that's hard in the education system for various reasons. But and sometimes it doesn't happen in the classroom. So I think figuring out situations where people can just be more human, more complicated. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that those are and thank you for bringing that up, because I keep forgetting to mention that we're really trying to build a creative infrastructure that values like local communities and what's already happening. So we're not trying to necessarily impose a curriculum or a way in which to do this for freedoms, but to see people where they are. And yeah.
Yeah, for me, I use photography, and for me, photography saved my life, and it's good for healing and self-reflection. So post uprising, a lot of us were suicidal, after going through what we went through. I was hospitalized. A lot of my activist friends were too, try to commit suicide. So I decided to, once again, collaborate. I found through the Gordon Parks Foundation, they know I'm big on mental health. I always speak on it. And they connected with the Institute of Integrative Health. So we decided to do a show about the uprising, but the platform we did was to talk about mental health, post-traumatic stress, and everything else. And then I did a photography workshop with people with autism, mental illness, and suffer from, anxiety, and that helped them digest their emotions a little bit better. So even I think art is not spoken a lot in the health space, but it really does work, and it really does help people heal and self-reflect. So I definitely feel like art is the thing that makes the world turn. It connects us all. And it it makes life easier.
Rick, I have to ask you to chime in on this too, because you've actually done, a piece of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think what you asked there is really it is a what you articulated was social sculpture, and this idea of everybody understanding the capacity and potential to be creative practitioners in their own lives and their own communities, and I think that's the thing we have to strive for. But the challenge, though, is that that's a very dangerous thing for society, and that's a very dangerous thing for power structures, and because no one wants, in general, the power structure as it is maintains its power based on the powerlessness of others. And to be creative, to know your own creativity, is a very powerful thing, and so that's a big hurdle. I think that we have to kind of maneuver around, because I don't know that it's going to come from institution. It's not going to be institutionally instituted, but I think through, and I'm excited to sit up here with folks. I haven't met Devin before, but I'm very excited by him and his energy and how he came to the work that he's doing. And I think that that's where I'm putting my hope, is in the innate ability of people to understand their creative capacity and that yearning desire to do it, and kind of emanate that among their circles and to grow it.
Well, since you asked all the panelists to speak,
Yes, I would appreciate that.
I'll say something to that. It's such a, we could spend a symposium on your question. But I will say that art does make a person independent, and it does create independent thinking. So you're absolutely correct. And with that comes a few things. I think with that comes a wholesomeness, a completeness. And with African Americans, that's dangerous to the power system, because then you're going to have to share power. And what I have done over the years is use art as a way to build self-esteem and a way to search for truths. And when I teach and work with African American children and any other children, I have to teach heritage and history with the art. That's what I do. Because it becomes then a way of an individual to understand their purpose. And there are so many ways in which we fulfill our purpose. What I have done with young people, I have been teaching young people since I've been young, is create programs that give them self-expression and to support them in any way that I can, as long as I believe it's constructive and not hurting someone else. So when you put a computer board in front of someone, if you put a painting brush in front of someone, if you put words that allow them to express themselves, then we're keeping them off the street. And we're keeping them away from negative things that will destroy them. Because we're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to build and create beauty. Right. Even if that means we have to reveal something that's not too pretty. So we have to have a society that supports the arts. And art really reaches people because it's visceral. I mean, intellectually, that's cool, physically, that's great. And if you get somebody involved physically in doing something, but emotionally is what we remember. So artists make people feel, whether that's photography or dance or theater, it makes you feel and you come away remembering that experience. And that's what I came up through, luckily, in the 60s. I was young, and it all made sense to me because it's logical. And when I say it, I'm talking about when you learn the history of this country and you learn about the beauty of Africa and you learn that African Americans were not always slaves. Our history did not start in America as an enslaved African. All of that is important because that's wholesomeness. And I teach it through art because I treat art as edutainment. I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it from all the panelists. Thank you.
And that's such a conundrum, though, that we do need art as a society, and yet it's dangerous. Like, I don't know where we go with, I mean, I do know, like, where I go
But
with
it's only dangerous if you have people in power who are not
Yeah.
righteous. It's not dangerous. It strengthens a society if it's used correctly.
Yeah, if you look at like propaganda and like the stigma that comes around black people and how we were presented to the rest of the world through photography, you know, that's how dangerous it is. So like, can you imagine if we actually had control of our narrative post-slavery? You know, we were projected to the world as being brutal and savage, like, and uneducated. So like, I went to certain parts of China, you know, they looked at me like, you know, crazy, you know, and it's not their fault. It's because what's been projected to the rest of the world. You know, art is very dangerous. Yeah.
And that's why I say the best thing to me that came out of integration was the fact that black people, I'm just gonna say black people and white people right now, were sitting next to each other and really were interacting, and it made most of what we learned from our parents a lie. Why am I saying that? Because I was a part of that generation that was forced to integrate. And it was not very pretty. And I said to myself, I said, okay, so we want to be equal to that? You know, that meanness, that hatred and all of that? I don't understand that. I said, what we want is fairness in terms of how we study and what our books are and all of that. So what we learned was, when I sat next to Tommy, and Tommy wasn't that smart. And so sat next to, for lack of better ways of describing this, Juanita. And Juanita was really smart. Now, she's black, he's white. That's not what we learned. We learned as a society that all white people were smart, non-criminal, and good people. I mean, and then they learned about us, white people learned about us, that we were all dumb, you know, mean, and hateful. And so when we as young people were around each other, we said, these things are not true. So.
Yeah, that's still an issue today. When you look at like all like the Trump supporters that have probably never talked to a black person a day in their life, but just haters because of because racism is taught at an early age, you know, and it's still an issue that, you know, for me as a person, like, you know, being in the activist community, I'm real big on learning. So like, if I don't know something I'm ignorant about, I have a problem about going and learn it. So, you know, like, I'm one of them people, as an artist, you know, police officers support me, you know, the community all around. So, you know, so like, when I talk to people, like, you haven't even had a conversation, you don't even understand. You know, even, you know, and even when you think about people, how they use, to this day, you think about black on black crime and like how that's a big issue. But if you look at the numbers, when the FBI released the numbers, it's like, you're most likely to get killed by someone you know or in your community. So, you know, like, it's a lot. We can talk about it all day.
So then how does art and how do artists approach learning, you know, the power dynamics in order to, you know, break it down somewhat?
Yeah, it's about having those difficult conversations that no one wants to have, and I feel like art can bring people who wouldn't be in proximity together. You know, like, I don't call myself a journalist or like a documentary. I like calling myself a dialogue creator, because my work starts a conversation. You know, like, I did a show in Baltimore, the Reginald F. Lewis Museum, and I had one of my homeboys who's from the hood, that hustles, that's in and out of jail, standing next to a police officer, looking at the same image. And they was having a deep conversation, and they agreed on a lot of points. And I had to walk up to them and say, you know, you're a police officer, right? But they would never be in the same space. You know, this is a police officer who lives in York, PA, and came to see the work because he was out there, he felt connected to it. And my friend is from Pennsylvania Avenue. He knew Freddie Gray, he was connected to it. They were connected about one thing. So you imagine if I didn't go and take pictures, they wouldn't be having that conversation in the first place. So I feel like art is a good way to bring people together that wouldn't even move in the same space to have that difficult conversation, which in turn moves us forward.
That is so true. That is just so true.
So it sounds like it's very much about personal interaction.
It is.
You know, it's not just looking at objects that you connect with.
But sometimes those objects
personal.
create that
Personal
connection.
connections that, you know, create dialogues that can help break down issues and teach about.
But it's also like alchemical. You can't, like, it's hard to formula, like make this into a formula. Like, I might see a sculpture here that like 10 years from now I'll think, oh, that changed my life or something like that. It's hard to.
Yes.
Okay, my question is for Mr. Allen. Because Black people do not control our image, there's this paradigm that has evolved about positive and negative images. And how do you interact with that idea? Is there a consciousness that you approach your work with as a result of that paradigm?
Yeah, definitely. I'm very big on representation, definitely in my community. It's something in the uprising. I was storytelling, so even with images, when I got people smashing police cars, if you see my images, you'll notice that the way that I shot it, you can't tell who it is, because I don't want to send anyone to jail, because I understand the rage at that point. But I think consciously. Sometimes it's about telling the truth and revealing it because it's really there. And then sometimes you got to make sure you're not exploiting. Just because for instance, I'm from Baltimore. I'm from a ghetto. But if I go to Chicago and I already know the issues in Chicago and I go out there looking for that stuff and then creating that stuff, I wouldn't do that. That's what I deem like my moral compass won't let me do. If it's around me, yes, I will document it, and I'm going to tell the truth about it. But I'm not going to go and create something that wasn't there that I see happen a lot. So it's all about your moral compass. And for me, the way that I document things is to tell the truth and invoke feelings. But I'm always conscious when I'm documenting, definitely when representing African Americans. I always, in my book, A Beautiful Ghetto, I don't need to go, even when I worked on the stuff for BuzzFeed, I don't need to go shoot a brother with a heroin needle in his arm. That's have been depicted so many times. What I do, let's talk about how strong he is. Let's talk about how beautiful he is, the fact that he can get through those hard times. Same thing in A Beautiful Ghetto. Everyone knows that Baltimore has 300 murders a year. Everyone knows we have an opiate problem. Let's talk about the intimate moments that no one wants to talk about. So I'm real big on, looking for the beauty in things, because it's not talked about. It needs to be more representation of that. So that's what a lot of my work is geared to. I'm gonna show you the negative, but I'm gonna show you about those intimate and those beautiful moments that people overlook and don't speak on.
Let me follow up. Can you give me an example of, say, an image or an artist who you think is not being honest? Say someone from a previous generation.
I think the perfect example, I'm not going to say any names, but I work with a white photographer. Like, once again, I'm big on collaboration. And we got into an issue. I had him working with my kids. So once again, I allowed him to use me as a conduit to get into my community. And he overstepped his bounds. 2 dudes were shot in the head execution style. And he photographed them before calling the police. And the family asked him to take the image down, and he refused to take the image down. I don't even need to explain to you how wrong that is. That's the photography, that we can't allow. And, and I felt bad because I allowed him to use, I basically gave him my hood pass. Like, look, he's a good guy, he's going to be documenting and working with the kids, but he had an ulterior motive because now he's creating images. 2 guys are shot, you call them, you should take the picture first, and then more come back to having a moral compass. That lets me know where your head is at. You have people that just, chase an image and just worried about making money, and then you have, people that actually care, and some people, you can do that. But once again, if you look at Gordon Parks' work and so many people, if you look at Jamel Shabazz, if you look at a lot of these guys' work, you can see the connection to the subject and how the heart is in every shot. Like I tell you, the best photographers shoot from the heart, not with their eyes, and you can see that in the imagery.
Thank you.
Any other questions from people in the audience? Thoughts? Okay. Yes. Okay. No more questions for Rick Lowe.
On that, I just want to ask you, Devin, on that last point. I mean, don't you think there's something in like the language of documentary photography and in the history of it that that makes it hard to get away from that sort of belief that the representational moment is gonna, like, that photographer for some reason believed that they needed to get that shot in order to tell that story. Like, it's messed up, but like, isn't there?
Yeah, when you think about the history of photography, like you look at like war photographers,
Right.
Do you know, like they not really connected to those places. They parachute in, do the job, and then leave.
Right.
You know, and that's something, being from Baltimore, and like I said, I'm real big on like gun violence. So like, for him to do that, he's not connected to it because you're gonna go home and lay down at night, and probably get a check from like New York Times or something. Whereas though for me, I know how I feel. Like I'm connected to. That's why I only document things that I'm connected to once again, and I feel like that's when the best documentation comes in, when you understand something. Just like you was in Ethiopia for how long?
Right.
Like you were there so long that you built a connection to it. And I think that's where we're definitely in post-social media, because the world moves so fast, that piece of journalism has been taken away because people are so fast going next story, because you're constantly scrolling your feed. The world is so much smaller. So you had a journalist, you could spend like a year on a project. And now these guys are coming in, for like 5 days and then leaving. There's no connection to the community. And that's very, very dangerous because a lot of the photographers that shoot this stuff don't control the narrative. They're not even doing it. They got to edit on the phone. They drop somebody off. They shoot it, send a picture back, and they go on about their business, not knowing how much damage one image can do. And it's very, very dangerous. That's why a lot of photographers that I love, they work with something. They've been working with it for a while. Right. Back to you being in Ethiopia for so long. Like you were able to build a connection. In terms, it makes the work better, but it gives you a better understanding of what you document. I feel like certain people don't spend that time with it. It's just about getting a shot, getting paid. Worrying about the accolades and stuff like that. Like a lot of people ask me like, yo, you could be living in New York doing all these things. It was like, well, I have an obligation to Baltimore, right now that, just, I have to be there. So sometimes you have to like put yourself, take a step back and understanding where the work is going, who the work is for, and what the work is going to be about.
Put the people before the money? You don't put people before money. I'm teasing you.
Never that. That's why, still in Baltimore, like I said, I was super pumped, like when For Freedom came to Baltimore and they reached out to me. Like that's what good research, definitely in photography. I feel like a lot of photographers don't do research anymore and like really dive into these stories. Like I told you, I got hit up to do women's campaign. I got hit up to do stuff for the LGBT community. I'm like, go get a member that's already understands the issues. They're like, well, we love your work. And it was like, yes, you love my work because of what I document, I was connected to. Right. Images.
Yeah, we have just a few minutes and 2 questions here. So why don't you start and then...
My question is really a variation on a theme, because she asked about how do you help create social change. And when I look at a lot of inequality, a lot of it is keeping up not only in education, but also with technology. But I think about one of the things that you said, where you meet a person where they're at, it's determined that their identity is deterministic. But I'm wondering, how do you help them transform to keep up with the changes going on in society?
You want to restate that for me just a little more precisely? What do you want from us to answer?
You started with an important point, is that as an artist, you meet your subjects where they're at, that you recognize them in their activities and in their daily life. Mm-hmm. But a lot of inequality deals with disruption. And I'm wondering, how do you use art to help them transform and to keep up with some of those changes?
Okay, did you, anyone, okay. my producer hat is coming on. And the reason why I say that is because we have like 6 minutes before we're supposed to be out of the building. And in my head is, I'm there. But let me just say this, that this is easier, I think, than people realize. When I say this is easier, to be able to incorporate art or to be able to raise somebody's self-esteem or to be able to help people focus in on their purpose, means that we just have to engage in conversation, we have to listen, we have to give another human being respect, which is what that photographer didn't give that community and you when he did what he did. And I said earlier that if we have respect for the people that we work with in life, if we listen, if we love what we do, that means that we're not going to do anything that's harmful to the people that we work with. That's the foundation of creating good art. And you just have to care. You just have to care, and you start there because we will approach it differently. We'll have syllabuses, we'll have different projects that we're going to create, but if you don't care, don't do it. Get out of our way.
Right. And similar, you said something earlier, like, because y'all doing stuff all over the country, but the fact that you've tapped so many artists, and even people that might not be artists, are actually activating people. That's what you're doing too, making people realize, like, I am an artist, and I have a voice. You're giving people so many, you're inspiring, and I think that's a big thing. You gotta keep them inspired. You gotta sometimes you gotta give people a platform for them to even realize what their true potential is.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
if you believe in them, then they're gonna believe in themselves.
Yes.
Right.
They have to hear that. And that's what art does as well. It reinforces who you are. We all are this, we have so many similarities. We have more similarities than we don't, but we have our differences. And those differences should be celebrated along with our similarities. And so each individual that walks into your room or into your space needs to know that being that individual is okay. And that's important. So a lot of social work too.
One last question.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Salcedo. I am a working journalist, and I am a past president of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. And I have a comment and I have a question. My comment, very briefly, goes to the question of why is it okay for some images that others of us would find disturbing to make it out into print or on television, and that is because we don't have enough people of color making the decisions. It's as simple as that. And until that pipeline gets expanded, and until you have people in the room who are making those decisions, who understand the community and the culture and what might be offensive and what is okay, those mistakes are going to continue to be made. My question is, the title of this symposium is Artists and Communities, plural. I understand that Gordon Parks, and one of the reasons I admire him so much is because he brought the African American community to the mainstream audience at a time when segregation prohibited people from going in and seeing what conditions were like. This has been an amazing day of hearing from the African American community, but I'm wondering, where are the other communities? Where are the Latino communities? Where are the Latino artists? Where are the Asian artists? Where are the Native American artists? And that's my question.
Well, that's for the artists or for the organizers of the symposium? Okay.
They're there, as you know. And I mean, I think, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
answer.
I think it's right. I mean, one thing that makes me think of artists and art and communities. I mean, I think about how Gordon Parks, even in the show, navigates so many different communities. He's in Maine, he's in Gloucester, he's in, Washington, D.C., he's in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I think about, as photographers, oftentimes, even when you know a community, even if I'm photographing my own mother, you're transgressing somebody else. You're transgressing, like you're going outside of yourself, and I think that's the idea that the importance of building community is so important as a way of countering the kind of mistakes or discrimination or whatever you want to call it that you're referring to, I also admire Gordon Parks for going to all these places and figuring out a way to find from his heart a way of connecting to these different places, and making photographs and making work that that elevates the humanity of it. And I was just the pictures in the show made me think of I recently went to San Juan for the first time, and there was just a quick anecdote. There's a theater troupe there that after Hurricane Maria was trying to figure out what to do, so they went to rural communities throughout Puerto Rico, and they said, "Hey, can we want to help? Can we help you rebuild your community? Can we help you cut down trees?" And the local community leader said to them, "No, don't cut down trees. You're artists. You're here, you have a talent and a skill to, inspire and to use your art to create, spirit within our community so we can cut down our own trees, so we can rebuild our community." And I think that notion of figuring out the way for art to be not just an instrument of social change, but a way of inspiring, humanity within all of us for us to be able to build our own communities.
Now, I said I wasn't going to answer. But let me just say something to what you posed. And your question was, why isn't this panel or today more inclusive? I think that's an excellent point to bring up, and I'm glad that you brought it up. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking that now that it's brought up, that future symposiums will be more inclusive. That's all I can say. I will say that Southside Community Arts Center is involved with doing exactly that. We've had a Native American collaboration, a Latino collaboration, and et cetera. But your point, to me, is so wonderfully made that we as an American society need to be about, when we can and when it says it's inclusive, should be inclusive.
And I can say one thing, and then we have to stop. We wanted to focus what we talked about today in relation to Gordon Parks and the exhibition, which it deals with an aspect of history that, that sort of helped to form the group that we invited today. And that's not to say that we shouldn't have done it otherwise or that we wouldn't do it otherwise the next time. And I would also say that it's a question we ask ourselves here at the National Gallery every day, we being curators and educators. And so I think it's a totally relevant question, and stay tuned for the next discussion because, there are discussions like this going on at many of the museums in Washington, often. And so I think, the more we do it, the more...
the better it gets.
I was going to say the more questions get answered, but also the more questions that I have. Mm-hmm. And so, thank you so much, everyone, for coming and
thank you.
Sitting through this today. And